Shalom, WJC family. Time for our weekly Torah Talk. The Torah portion this week is Naso, the longest portion perhaps in the Torah, and sort of the ending of what we see at the beginning of the book, at the beginning of Bamidbar, sort of a census taken where everyone belongs, then a purification of the camp, the counting and setting up of the religious life of the camp with the Levite census, everyone being told where they need to camp. And in Naso culminates with this blessing of the whole people. Strangely, nestled right in the middle of those are two peculiar statuses of people. One is the Sotah, a very troubling idea. If a husband gets jealous of a wife, he can put her through this trial by ordeal if he has no proof. And that trial by ordeal is adjudicated by the Kohanim, by the priests. Following that, we have the status of the Nazirite, someone who takes a special vow, so zealous and passionate are they in their religious fervor, to separate themselves from the community by growing their hair and avoiding wine. Nazir actually means to be separate. Rashi says that's to separate yourself from wine. But the name itself maybe means to separate oneself from the camp, which may be why at the end of their period of being avowed to not do these things, they have to make a bunch of offerings, including a sin offering. So the question I want to highlight here is that what are these two people, these two statuses, the Sotah and the Nazirite, doing here in Bamidbar, in this section about organizing the community, as opposed to being where it seems like they should belong in Parshat Vayikra, where we discuss the different statuses that need to be taken care of by the priests. So, for example, the Mitzorah, someone who comes down with leprosy, it's the priests who need to cure their leprosy, to treat and cure their leprosy. Zav, someone who has a nocturnal emission, it's the priests who have to, they have to come and make a sacrifice. It's all sort of fixed or adjudicated by the priesthood, which makes sense in the book of Leviticus, in the book of Vayikra, which is all about the priestly duties. What are the Sotah and the Nazirite doing here in Bamidbar in this section about organizing the community? And to try and answer that question, and I think it's a very important question because it's going to tell us something about maybe how we organize our own communities and the value of community in general. So I was teaching last night for our Sulam, for emerging leaders, and was reminded of this text from Yoma 9b about the destruction of the temple. It says, why was the first temple destroyed? Because of adultery, rampant murder, and idolatry. And the second temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, senseless hatred. So we ask ourselves the question, what do adultery, rampant murder, and idolatry have in common? And one theory is that they are describing a complete breakdown of society. That is, adultery is the breakdown of the family structure, murder is a breakdown of the judicial or the justice system or the general values of, civil society, and idolatry is a breakdown of the religious status of society. And sinat chinam, senseless hatred, we are told, has the weight of all three of them put together. So maybe sinat chinam also can break down society. I think maybe we're being reminded of that in our parsha as well. That the Sotah is in fact not an adulteress. The husband has no proof. It's an awful, very disturbing piece of Torah here. But maybe it's here to tell us that that kind of, here it's kinat chinam, right? Senseless jealousy. But this breakdown in the family structure is a threat to the organization of society. We might not like the Sotah ordeal that's brought up as a cure for that, but maybe that's what it's doing here. That's what it's here to address. So too the Nazirite, which we learn in Yoma that idolatry right? The turn away from civic religion is the threat. Here, the Nazir is so zealous in his religion, right? Just as much as people abandoning religion can be a threat to the order of society, so too can people being so overzealous that they separate themselves from society. And I think we see both happening today, where the community, Jewish and even America in general, is being pulled apart by that religious life. The non-religious on one hand, and very conservative, even radically conservative religion on the other hand. And so we see that in the Nazirite, that breakdown of the religious life. And the whole rest of the portion is about the civic life. So maybe here we're getting this reminder. And what I wanted to highlight was this idea that sinat chinam, senseless hatred, is equivalent to all of it. I feel a breakdown of community happening in our society. You probably feel it too. It's stressful, it's difficult, and I think it's happening in all of those spheres, in the civic sphere, with rampant murder. That seems to fit. In the religious sphere, on both ends of it, with people abandoning religion or becoming so zealous about religion that they're completely unaccepting of anyone who disagrees with them. And breakdown in the family structure. And I don't mean, families of all kinds are welcome here. It's Pride Month, and I know modern families have all kinds of forms. And in fact, I appreciate the passion with which some non-traditional family structures sometimes are even more passionate about their will to become a family than sort of traditional family structures. But it's the non-family structure, the breakdown of the family structure altogether. I think we see that happening as well in all different kinds of ways. Families just not spending time together. Parents abandoning children, sort of abandoning their family values and whatnot for one reason or another, tempted away by isms of one sort or another. We see this breakdown happening, and the result seems to be, like the Talmud warns, sinat chinam, this senseless hatred. There just seems to be so much anger and so much hatred for anyone who disagrees with us, a willingness to completely ostracize someone if they disagree, to refuse to even sit down and talk and have a conversation, to communicate with someone with whom we disagree. And I think we need to heed the warning of this parsha and remember that senseless hatred is how societies collapse. If we feel like we are in the middle of such a societal collapse, if we feel like the value of community just isn't there anymore, then it's easy to point fingers, but we need to look in the mirror also. Are we doing the hard work to make community with people who we don't agree with 100%? To listen, to not only tolerate differences, but to celebrate differences, to see what we can learn from one another, to breed that understanding and that appreciation of the other that allows us to raise up society, to abandon senseless hatred, to reestablish communal norms, whether it's in the religious world, norms of tolerance and celebration of each other, whether it's in the family unit, whatever that looks like exactly, but having that value of togetherness that breeds into a greater community, that value of togetherness. And obviously in the civic sphere, to get under control the rampant crime, the hatred, the hate crimes, the murder, right, the mass shootings that we're experiencing now, all of those things, if we all do our parts to raise up again community, then hopefully we will be living in a much better society, a much more beautiful world. To heed the lessons of this week's Parsha, the organization of society takes deliberate care in at least these three spheres. Let's ask ourselves, how will we do our part to make those more pleasant, more productive, and to really heal the rifts that are plaguing our society? No more sinat chinam, instead ahavat chinam. May we live with a lot of senseless love and kindness and care and celebration of all those around us. Shabbat Shalom.